Well, welcome to another chat with Tim. Today, I want to talk about something I was asked when I was a guest on a podcast recently, and they just asked me to talk about why escaping into fantasy is an issue for many people from complex trauma. And I've talked about this in the past, but not for quite a while. And I thought, yeah, it might be a good topic just to go over again because I think for many people, it's an issue that happens in their life and they're not even aware that it's happening, or if they are, they're not necessarily aware to the extent in which it's happening in their life. So let me begin just by explaining what we mean with escaping to fantasy. What happens to a child when they feel in danger? So they have complex trauma, they don't feel safe, their needs aren't being met, they're being neglected, abused, criticized, there's no connection. Their natural response is to go to fight or flight, to get out of there, to defeat the enemy, but they're too little to do that. And so they go to another survival skill, which is freeze or dissociation. And basically what that is, it's a way to mentally get out of the present situation. So being present in the present means being in pain, means having problems that you can't resolve. It means hurt. And so I need to escape. I need to get out of this present, but I can't, my body's here, but I can escape in my mind. I can go to a different place in my mind. And so it's a really important survival tool for many children when they're in situations that they can't resolve and are very painful. And so it's escaping the negative emotions of the present moment. It's escaping being present to the present. It's a way to try to get some of that negative feelings, the negative reality of their world to just disappear for a little while. And so I've talked to many clients over the years about this and just asked different things that they have done as ways that they fantasize. And so a common one is they meet somebody online and now they start to fantasize about that person and create this narrative in their mind that the most beautiful, wonderful person, and when they meet and get together, it's going to be a perfect relationship. And it's quite a story that they create and then escape to regularly in their mind. Others, they fantasized even as children about someday becoming this famous movie star, music star, important, wealthy person that everybody looks up to and respect. That was a common thing. And then many who have been sexually abused can talk about escaping in their mind so that what's happening to them physically, they're not even aware of. They're off on a beach in the Bahamas. They're on the ceiling watching as if it's happening to somebody else. They just blank it all out. So they go to this escape through some different world that they go to. And then children that were bullied, children that weren't accepted at home, who are constantly criticized, often fantasize about being involved in a group, a gang where they're totally accepted, respected, looked up to all the time. And then many people with constantly being on their phone, constantly being on social media, and it's their escape. It's a fantasy, or they're constantly reading novels or watching movies that take them to a different place, a different world, out of the present. And then many have revenge fantasies, how they're going to make that person pay. They have success fantasies or sexual fantasies. So there's all different kinds of fantasies. But for a person who was living in a lot of pain that they couldn't resolve, it was a necessary survival tactic when they were little. So let me make two distinctions right up front that I think are important. So number one is not all fantasies are unhealthy. It's important to understand that there's healthy fantasy, healthy use of your imagination, and we're going to talk about that. But there's unhealthy fantasy. An unhealthy fantasy is where you use fantasy to escape your life, to replace it with an alternate life because you can't live in this life. So you're not using that imagination to support this life, you're using it to replace this life. So that's the first one. The second one is fantasizing really itself isn't the problem. It can become a problem, but it's actually a symptom of something going on in your nervous system. And so what we want to understand is not how do you stop unhealthy fantasies, it's what's going on in my nervous system that's causing it to feel the need to escape to a fantasy. That to me is a much more productive, helpful way to look at all of this. And so what we've seen over and over is your nervous system is committed more than anything else to protect you, to keep you safe. And so if you've gone into a fantasy, that was its tool, the best tool it could find to keep you safe in very difficult situations. So if you're still escaping into fantasy, something's happening in your nervous system that's triggering that. So what I want to do then is look at the fantasies that develop in the three different vagal states. So we got the ventral vagal state when you're safe, secure, connected, loved. Then you've got the sympathetic vagal state, which is your fight flight. Then you got your dorsal vagal state, which is your freeze. So I want to look at what do the fantasies look like in each of those different states. So let me begin with the sympathetic, because I think this is the one people will relate to the easiest. So sympathetic is you're in fight flight. You don't feel safe. This is not a good place for you right now. And so your fantasies, they're intense. They revolve around power, around control, around revenge, around escaping threat, around winning, conquering, proving yourself, being admired, being safe. So it's very much that fantasy of getting to fight flight where you defeat your enemy or you escape to a safe place. Many people, when they're in a sympathetic vagal state, find that these fantasies are really compulsive. They're really intense. They're hard to turn off. They just become obsessed. They consume their mind. And so I want to walk you through some of the possible scenarios that would have been in a child's life where these type of fantasies would have developed. But what I want you to see in them is that the function of these fantasies is your mind is trying to resolve the problem, the threat. It's trying to go from a place of feeling no control, no power, feeling helpless, to having control, to having power. A place of no justice to having justice. A place of shame and disrespect to having respect. So it's trying to resolve the problem that is causing the danger for the child. So let me give you the first childhood scenario that many of you can relate to. So let's say you had very volatile caregivers. So they were angry, there was addiction, instability, chaos, violence. And so you were walking on eggshells. You didn't know what to expect on any given day. It was unpredictable. There was no consistency when it came to a sense of safety. So what does a child then fantasize about? Well, I'm powerful. I'm in a situation where I'm in control. I'm untouchable. I'm in a situation where I can swoop in and rescue and save people like me in the situation I'm in right now. And I win all the confrontations and beat up the bad guys and I fix everything. So basically your nervous is saying, I can't fix the present, but I'll make a story where I can. Then a second example would be the child who was neglected. Their needs were not met, or their needs were minimized by their parents. So their parents were present physically and met maybe their physical needs, but they weren't present emotionally, and they weren't meeting their emotional needs. And so They weren't being seen. They weren't mattering to the parents. They weren't being understood by the parents. They were there, but they weren't loved, seen, respected, cared for. So their 12 needs were not consistently met. So what is the fantasy pattern of that child? They imagine being in a family where all their needs are met. And what's happening there is they're imagining being in a place where they're finally getting what they know they should be getting right now, but they're not. They know they've got these needs. They know certain things aren't happening to them. They're aware of that, and so they're picturing a situation where that is finally happening. So they're being understood, they're being seen, they're being valued, they're being respected. And so they go to fantasies where they're seen, fantasies where they're famous, respected, fantasies where others value them, others choose them, others want them. That's where they go. And so again, their nervous system is saying, I can't get my needs met right now in reality, but I can create a world where they are. And so what they're feeling deep down from all of that neglect is, I don't matter. It's a shame message that because parents see some of me, they've rejected me. And so anybody that sees me will reject me. So I will create a fantasy that solves my shame, where I matter, where I am seen, I am valued. Now, I want to add a caution to this one, because it's really important to see how this can play out later in adult life. So you imagine this child with all these unmet needs. Those needs don't go away. They're still there. They're still longings. They're deep longings. They've created a fantasy to try to solve them, but that fantasy hasn't truly solved them. So now they go into adult life and they meet a narcissist who knows how to love bomb, how to groom. A narcissist who sees this person and senses all their longings and all these needs. So they start doing things that look like they're meeting all of those needs. And what happens in that person? They go, oh, finally, I've got all of my needs met. The things that I had to fantasize about has now become a reality. I now am going to finally be taken care of. What they don't realize is that narcissist is using them. The narcissist is love bombing them. The narcissist is not truly meeting their needs. And so they end up being dumped by the narcissist, being hurt by the narcissist, where the narcissist now wants that person to only meet the narcissist's needs. And they got to put all their needs aside again. The narcissist now criticizes them constantly. And all of a sudden, they're back to their needs are not being met. But what is the danger at that point? The danger is to go, well, the first 6 months of the relationship, he was meeting my needs. We can somehow get back to that. So now they have a new fantasy that they can return to the early state of the relationship. So now they put up with abuse and they go, oh, that he's just having a bad day. He's got lots of stress at work, because that's the way he really is, how he was in the first 3 to 6 months of the relationship. And what they think is the mask that the narcissist wore was the reality. And when the truth begins to escape, when the mask begins to slip, they think that the truth is actually a lie. It's actually an anomaly. And so their fantasy that they created out of those first months now keeps them hoping they can get back to what is an impossible reality, that the narcissist will actually love them and meet their needs for the right reasons. And so it's such a dangerous scenario that builds these different fantasies that keep people trapped. So another common experience for many kids in complex trauma is growing up with constant criticism, being compared to others, always feeling defective, always feeling not enough. And so their fantasy is this perfect version of them that is more attractive, more competent, more confident, smarter, Everybody just looks up to them. And so it's basically, if the real me wasn't acceptable, I'll create a me that is. And then another common scenario is the children of complex trauma had to take care of everybody else's needs and emotions. They had to be the responsible one. They had to parent their parents. Their needs got put aside. Their needs were secondary. And so they develop fantasies where somebody will finally take care of them, where they can just rest, relax, collapse, be held, have somebody dote on them. They don't have to be strong anymore. Everybody will attend to every one of their needs. They can just sit back and be cared for. And then another one, children who grow up with constantly being excluded, chronically being the outsider, not fitting in, feeling lonely all the time. So they develop fantasies where they're the most popular person. Everybody wants to be their friend. They're central to the group. They're respected deeply. They're the superstar. Again, they're trying to get the need for belonging met, for connection met. So I think maybe you see some common themes that are coming out of these sympathetic vagal states. So there's the power and dominance, not being helpless anymore, not being in unjust situations anymore, being able to exact revenge, win arguments, get control, have power, be feared, respected. And then there's secondly the healing the shame, recognition, validation, being admired, being chosen, belonging. That's a big one. Then there's the revenge, justice, rescue ones where you're going to get saved by others, you're going to save others, you're going to make wrong things right. There's a fourth type of fantasy that can develop for some people with trauma. And we'll get to it more in the dorsovagal state, but it can happen in the sympathetic state. And that's just anxiety fantasies, anxiety scenarios that grow into worst case scenario fantasies, where you begin to go, oh, this could happen, but this could happen. And so now you replay conversations and focus on all the negatives. Now you begin to imagine things being worse or getting worse. And so there's something in your brain that just needs to feed that anxiety with worst case scenario. So across all of these fantasies that we've talked about, what you have seen is the child's nervous system is trying to meet the needs that weren't being met in the present. So they're trying to complete what couldn't happen, to get justice, to get love, to get value, to get belonging, to get connection. So they're trying to compensate for what was missing, or they're trying to escape what is unbearable. So that's just the first vagal state. We'll do the next two next time. What I'm hoping that you're going to be able to see is many people, they think they're in their ventral vagal state. They think they're doing really well. But all of a sudden they're slipping into revenge fantasies, sexual fantasies, belonging fantasies, being a superhero fantasy. That should be an alert, a cue to say, something's caused you to switch into your sympathetic vagal state. Now, don't beat yourself up for that, but go, what is going on below the surface? Why is my nervous system going back to a fantasy as my way of coping? Hopefully that's helped as an introduction. Thanks for being here. Please like and subscribe, share, make a comment. We really appreciate it.